Hi everybody, welcome to week 4 of class. I hope you're somewhere warm. I know the blizzard kind of hit yesterday and we're kind of snowed in here at my house. I'm especially sorry to anyone who's not from Nebraska. I know this could be a little bit of a shock with all this cold snow. Anyway, let's talk about what you're going to be reading about this week. So basically the chapter is on the Gospel of Mark and John. And I just want to tell you a little bit about the Gospel according to Matthew because it's not really discussed in this book. But basically Matthew's Gospel was written to important, wealthy people, and it really has a focus on men, like important men. So if you compared the stories of Jesus' birth between Luke's Gospel and Matthew's Gospel, you'll find that the angel Gabriel appears to Joseph instead of Mary, and that the wise men, who would have been wealthy, important men, are the people who come visit the baby Jesus instead of the shepherds. So that's just a little example, but it's pretty much like that throughout most of Matthew's Gospel. Also, Matthew's Gospel relates or refers to the Old Testament at least 60 times, so most people think that's why it's put first in the New Testament. But the reason that it's not included in this book is because its focus is mostly on men, and therefore when the author's trying to highlight the different women in the Gospels, they're not as prevalent in Matthew's Gospel. Mark and John are pretty different from each other, and you'll get to see kind of a little bit about each Gospel, as well as the important women that are mentioned in those Gospels. And I just want to remind you that it's kind of uncommon for women to be mentioned at all. The majority of the stories really are about men. And when they are mentioned, sometimes rarely they're mentioned by name. Otherwise, they're often mentioned by the man they're related to, or they might be mentioned by their condition, like the woman with the hemorrhage, or they're mentioned by their geographical area. So some of them, for example, there's a woman called the Syrophoenician woman, and that just tells you where she was from. And just the fact that they're mentioning her by her geographic area tells you just how uncommon it was for Jesus to interact with women. All they have to say is, this is that woman he talked to in Syrophoenicia, and everyone knows who they're talking about in the early days. So anyway, the gospel as a genre was kind of a new invention created by Mark. There was no gospel before this time. A gospel is a narrative that tells the story of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. And of course, that's the main focus, is Jesus. But what the author is trying to highlight for you is the different women who are mentioned within these Gospels. So make sure you pay close attention to their stories. When you take the next quiz, I'll for sure ask you about the specific people. And I hope that you felt good about the last quiz. Just so you know, when you're taking the quizzes, I try to name the question by the chapter it's in, or something that will help narrow it down for you so that when you're trying to find the answer, it's a little bit easier. So I would pay attention to the name of the question before you start reading the question. Also, next week you have another quiz. Just so you know, just like this week, you'll have to take it by Friday. I will try to post it earlier than I did this week. Also, in 2 weeks, I just want to make sure that you see that you have a research paper due. So let me talk to you about that research paper. The assignment is for you to research something dealing with the Virgin Mary. So you will either research a Marian apparition, which I'll explain what that is in a moment, a Marian devotion, or a Marian doctrine. So basically an apparition would refer to the many times Mary has appeared to people throughout history. This really started as early as when Mary was still alive. There's one account of Mary appearing to people when she was in the upper room with the apostles, so she kind of had the gift of bilocation as well. But there are lots of times where people have made, the claim that Mary appeared to them, and not all of them have been approved by the church, but some of them have been approved. And so you can look up Marian apparitions, and many different places will come up. There's some that are more famous than others, so you'll see that they show up a lot more. I want you to, when you're researching, pay attention to the common denominators, the things that happen in several of the apparitions. So you would simply pick one of those and write a paper about it. Or if you want to look at the Marian devotions, then you would research something like the Rosary, or a novena, or the Chaplet of Divine Mercy, one of the prayers that we have to Mary. And if you research the doctrine about Mary, then you would simply look into one of the claims. For example, we say that Mary was born without sin. We call that the Immaculate Conception. We say that she was a virgin forever, her whole life. We call that the perpetual virginity. We believe that she was assumed body and soul into heaven, and we call that the Assumption. And those are the three most common teachings about Mary that you'll find. Anyway, the research paper itself is 3 to 6 pages long. It must involve at least 4 outside sources. When you write the paper, you should write an intro, a body, and a conclusion. And let's just talk about each of those for a moment. In the intro of a paper, I should not know what your topic is in the very first sentence. And at the same time, I should definitely know what your topic is by the last sentence of the first paragraph. Also, in the first paragraph, I should have a good sense of what your main points will be. The body of the paper obviously tells the main part of the paper, the stuff that you've researched, the information you found. And then in the conclusion, you're summarizing what you've researched. And also, in a good conclusion, there would be no new information. And one last thing, this is a formal paper, so make sure that you do not use any personal pronouns. If you have any questions about what would be good topics, please feel free to email me. And the same is true if you have any questions before the next quiz. I hope you have a great week. Stay warm, and I will talk to you again next week. Thank you.